Woman Who Chat is sponsored by Grow Radio. Grow Radio is an online radio station dedicated to bringing you a different podcast on the hour, every hour. I'm proud that Woman Who Chat is played on Grow Radio every Tuesday at 3 p.m. and Friday at 8 a.m. and to be a part of their podcasting community. If you want to listen to the station, explore their shows, check out many of the blogs to improve your podcasting skills, or get your podcast onto Grow Radio, head over to growradio.uk today. Welcome to Woman Who Chat, and today I'm chatting with Verity Tiff of Ventures with Verity. Hello, Verity.
Hello, Sandra.
It's great to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to our chat because we're going to talk a little bit about what you do now and how you got here. But also, I think there's a very strong message within your journey in that, when we retire, we don't need to retire and sit and put our feet up. We can do other things. And I think I'm chatting to so many women right now who have gone through a career and finished after a long service. I'd say in the olden days, it was expected that women either didn't work or when they finished work, that was it. They put their feet up. And that's not the case with you. So tell us first a little bit about your backstory, what your career was before you retired, although you didn't retire.
Yeah, well, I haven't retired myself. I was sort of retired for a couple of years. Basically, I almost drifted into being a teacher. Like a lot of women, family circumstances, relationship circumstances, maybe took the easy option, but it lent itself to what I was doing. And so I ended up being a teacher. And a lot of teaching I really loved, but a lot of it I found extremely stressful. And there did come a point when I was a single parent that I almost felt trapped in it because I couldn't really justify taking a big salary cut to retrain. And so I just carried on teaching until finally I just decided that no, enough was enough. I didn't matter if I took a salary cut. And so I left teaching.
Yeah. And I think teaching has changed over the years. I remember when I was at school a long, long time ago, most of the teachers were women. So it was very much a female occupation, more so than male. In both the schools I went to, although I did go to an infant primary and then to a girls' grammar, so it probably did lend itself more to women. But teaching has changed, with the Ofsted targets, all those things, key stage 1, 2, 3, all those different targets that have to be met. It's changed, I think, from the vocation it was. I went to school to be good, to behave, and it was expected and there was a hierarchy. And I think some of that has lost and sort of faded over the years as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because my middle daughter is actually a teacher. And she's sort of regretting it in lots of ways because for similar reasons, it's working out how you move on from that. And it's the constant change. I took a bit of a break from full-time teaching when my children were little, but I actually was doing bits and pieces of evening class and supply work. But I went back as the national curriculum came out, and there was all these things about this is going to not change. And every single year, or at least once a year, there were new initiatives. So you ended up keep doing stuff. Because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, I would do stuff the best I could, deliver the best possible lectures and lessons and notes, and then I'd have to all change it the next year. And I just got disheartened. And I think that's what's happening in teaching these days. People are getting disheartened because the goalposts are always being moved.
Yeah. And, my son and his wife are both teachers. In fact, when my son told me that he was going into teaching, it's something he wanted to do since he was 10 years old. So it was obviously he was driven towards doing that. But I said to him, don't do a teaching degree, do a maths degree. And then if you decide to do something else, you haven't just got teaching in your pocket. You've got a solid subject degree that you can go off and do other things with. He's still in teaching. He still loves it. And, as I say, it's not for everybody right now. And it is a very sort of, I don't know how many years you were in teaching, but people stay in it 10, 20, 30 years, don't they?
Off and on, I must have been a teacher over 30 years. I mean, not full-time service teaching because of family commitments and moving around and things, but basically, yeah, the majority of my working life really was as a teacher in one form or another.
And you said something I'm going to pick up on, Verity. You said that, you were a single parent for a while, as was I, and you were in that trap whereby you couldn't give up the salary to do something different. I've been there. I know what that's like. And you go into work every day, you don't want to do what you're doing, but you can't jump because you're reliant on that salary for bringing up children. And that's hard, isn't it? Motivating yourself every day to do something when you really know you want to do something else.
Yeah, I think I was quite driven to try and be better, and I went for promotions, some of which were probably, with hindsight, a bit of a mistake, put a lot of pressure on myself. But yes, I think, yeah, if I could live my life again, I would have probably made a lot of different choices. But on the other hand, I learned a lot of skills as a teacher. I mean, I've never been afraid of talking to an audience. And I've never been afraid of teenagers, because most of my life was spent with teenagers at one time. So I'm quite comfortable talking to groups of teenagers. And
Yeah.
that sort of actually brought me on to an opportunity I had last week to actually talk to college students, which was really good, actually. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And I always say this to people, only look back to look at the skills you've gained. And, we can't turn the clock back. We can't change things. There's no point in having regrets because we can't do anything about it. But if we look at the journey we've had and the skills we've gained, it's amazing how many of those skills are transferable. And you just mentioned there, you're not frightened of teenagers, you're not frightened of standing up and speaking to an audience. And that is a fear of many people. That is a skill that just comes naturally to you in your zone of genius.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm more hesitant in small groups, bizarrely. I think I put on a bit of a front when I'm in front of a big audience.
That's great. Because teaching, you're constantly in front of a big
Yeah.
audience. One of the most challenging audiences, I would say, when you're speaking teenagers.
Yes, probably, yes.
Yeah, it's keeping them engaged, isn't it? And the
Yeah.
older generation, you're worried about them falling asleep and getting bored. The younger generation, you're worried about them doing something completely random.
I've done that as well. At one time I used to go into a couple of retirement homes and help with like their Sunday services, and it was the challenge: can I keep them awake?
Let's obviously come forward. So you did leave teaching and you went into, well, I'll loosely say retirement.
Mm.
And, I talk about ikigai and the Japanese concept of retirement. And there is no word for retirement in Japan because everybody lives their life's purpose. And I'll do another podcast on that topic another day. But the thing is, many people don't just go into retirement these days. I think the working generation, since the retirement age moved, people just don't want to retire and they don't need to retire and they can keep doing what they're doing, but or something different. And I know so many women that have launched new businesses post retirement. So talk us through, you left teaching and then what was your next step?
Well, I had a couple of years where I had a lot of issues with both my parents, and because I had moved to Coventry, I didn't have a big network of people I knew. And so I was just looking to be involved in different things. And I was talking to somebody about what I enjoyed doing, and the opportunity came up to train as what's called a blue badge tourist guide, which is a professional qualification in tourist guiding. And in the regions outside London, those training courses don't happen very often. And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. And so I thought, oh, that'll be good fun. I'll enjoy it. It was actually a lot harder work than I thought it was going to be, but I did thoroughly enjoy it. So I mostly retrained because it was interest. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the training. I enjoyed meeting new people. It got me visiting places, got me learning new things. And so that was how I started off. And then, having invested that amount of time and money, and passed 8 exams to be a qualified guide, I thought, well, I probably ought to try and do some work around this and get some of this money back, maybe, or at least make use of it. I didn't want to feel it being just a useless qualification. And so that was really what prompted me to set up as a guide.
And I don't think people realize that, we were chatting before we came on, and, I say I'll go to Italy and I'll go to Florence or I'll go to Venice or I'll go anywhere, as a tourist. And I think nothing of booking a tour or a walking tour or something like that with a professional in the area, that's going to take me around a walking tour really of the sites in a day or half day or however it's framed. And I've done many of those. Yeah, I would never think of going on a tour of where I live. And I bet you do tours of Coventry, and I don't know whether you do them elsewhere, but I don't know what the cultural and the amazing sights of Coventry are. I know we've got three spires, and I know we've got a cathedral, and old and a new, and Lady Godiva. That's probably about my limit.
I think it's probably the same for a lot. I mean, I do tours outside Coventry. In terms of ones that members of the public can book on as individuals, I tend to focus on Coventry because it's easy for me to get there and deliver it. But I do tours throughout what's termed the heart of England, which is a huge area, really the middle of England, basically. And yeah, there's always something to learn. Every single tour I've done in Coventry where I've had people from Coventry, they've always said, well, I've never been here before, or we didn't know that. So I think there's always something to learn. And I'm learning all the time as well. I quite often learn from people who come on my tours. There'll be things that they mention or know, and I think, oh, that was interesting. I've always wondered that. Thanks for telling me, because I can always learn as well from the people I'm taking around.
Yeah, and I think, let's use the example of the American tourist that comes because a lot of American tourists do come to the UK and Japanese tourists as well, Chinese tourists. And we've got a huge cultural Chinese quarter really in Coventry now with the university. And
Mm.
I think people want to find out more, but they research before they come. So they probably know what they want to see or ask questions. And how do you deal with that when somebody asks you something and you don't know the answer?
Well, I think the biggest thing is I never lie. I don't make stuff up. And occasionally I make mistakes, or I might have, but and I accept that if people, yeah, with these days with their phones, with Google, if they ask something, I think, well, actually, I'm not entirely sure. It might be, and more often than not, if they're really interested, by the time we finish the tour, they've found out and they've told me, and I think, oh, thanks, that's great, and we can have a conversation about it. So I think the biggest thing is I don't feel threatened. I think, well, they've paid for the tour, they've paid for my expertise, and I'm not going to pretend to things I don't know. I'll give a classic example of this. I've done a couple of tours last year for architects. Now, my background is not architecture. I'm very interested in it, but my background was actually biochemistry. It doesn't necessarily translate to tourist guide. And I said, look, I'm not an architect, so I'm hoping I can learn some stuff as well. And so, yeah, we'd have that conversation about sometimes about what particular styles were, if it wasn't entirely obvious.
Yeah,
Classic example, our Coventry bus station. They weren't quite sure what style of architecture that was either.
I call it a mess. But interested, you get people and you say you don't make it up and you don't lie. I mean, a lot of our listeners may have watched The Apprentice, and one of the challenges on The Apprentice is they give them a town and tell them to
Oh, yeah.
talk. They make the stuff up and it's hilarious to watch. But you'd be disappointed if you'd paid for that tour, and you were getting false facts, really.
I'm amazed that they don't have more requests for their money back, to be perfectly honest. And in fact, saying that is really funny because last week when I was talking to some students at the City College in Coventry on the tourism and travel course, I said, and we were talking about tour guides and tourist guides and whatever. And I said, you look on The Apprentice. I said, most years they've got some sort of tour guiding task. I said, watch it for all the things not to do.
I know. And, I book tour guides when I go on holiday because I want to do things quickly. I want to pack a lot in a short space
Mm.
of time. There's nothing worse. And I did this one year. I went to a place in Italy that I'd never been to before. And I Googled and looked for various things, but I couldn't find them. And that was more frustrating. I spent half a day looking for one place. And then I thought, if only I'd booked a tour, a walking tour or something, I would have found it a lot quicker. So I suppose that's why people book somebody that's got the knowledge, as it were. That's why you go to London and you book a taxi driver with knowledge. They have to pass a test on the sites of London before they can become a taxi driver. So there's all those different things. I think, people learn from you, but as you say, you learn from them as well. So you've turned this into a business to recoup your investment.
Yeah.
So, what is your target? Are you targeting people from the UK and locally, or are you there as a resource for visitors coming from abroad?
A bit of both, really. It's been a very difficult one. I mean, I know almost get fed up with people talking about the pandemic and the impact that had. I mean, for me, I didn't qualify till 2016, but because of some family issues, didn't really get going until 2017. So I'd only really been going a couple of years and beginning to find out what sort of tours I wanted to offer, because when you first qualify, anything you think you could possibly do, you just say, yes, I'll do that. And then think, right, okay, now I've got to prepare this, got to sort this out. So, but when the pandemic came, I was just beginning to make those contact within the travel trade, beginning to work out repeat tours, knew what I could offer, knew what I liked doing. And of course, the pandemic came. And that really was a big reset for me that year, 2020. And that was really when I started offering public tours to remind people that I was still trading and to give people a product to try and explain what I could offer to them. So I target a mixture really, people from the UK, but also from abroad, because as you said, generally speaking, the people that are more prepared to pay for a professional guide tend to be people that are visiting from abroad.
Yeah. What motivates you? I mean, you could just kick your feet back and say, "No, I'm in retirement now." So what motivates you to want to keep going and to do something?
I like meeting people. I think bizarrely, by nature, I'm actually quite an introvert, and I could very easily just retreat into not doing very much. It gives me the kick to get out, get up, do something, and all the research and exploring before I do tours. It saves me thinking, where shall I go today? I know where I'm going because I've got to research this Stratford, or I've got to research Oxford, or I've got a tour that's Downton Abbey sites or something like that. And it just gets me going, really.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? As the Japanese say, find your purpose and your
Mm.
passion. And if you get out of bed every morning and do something that you enjoy, something that gives, reward, not only financially, but as you say, you like meeting people, it ticks all the boxes then. So it doesn't feel like work, does it?
No, it keeps me active as well, because I've a condition that means that if the worst thing I can do is be sitting around for too long, so actually to try and do something that's reasonably active does help. So yeah.
So what's on the horizon? What have you got coming up?
Well, I've been really busy in January because I was contacted in the autumn by people called Voice Map, who do self-guided audio tours. And I have been trying to work out, I'm doing a self-guided audio tour of Coventry, the first one. I hope it will be the first of several, not just of Coventry, but through the wider region. And we're almost at the point where I'm going to be able to actually start recording my voice rather than it being this robotic voice that reads my script, because it's the technical challenges of working with a whole new way of working. So it's been a lot of work, but I've enjoyed it, and I'm hoping it will be out soon.
So that's one of those where you plug your headphones into an app or your phone
Yeah,
and it guides you around places. Very similar, I suppose, to what you do when I mean, I've been to Harry Potter World.
yeah,
You put the headphones on and you plug in and you can pause it and things like that. Very
yeah.
similar to that.
Yeah, it's that sort of idea, and I think that there's been lots of challenges in you've got to have the locations where the GPS picks up to pick up that next location. It's also mixing and matching actual the facts and interesting things about what people are looking at with directions of where they go next or where they've come from, including safety things like crossing roads, because you don't want to be so busy talking about something else that they forget they're crossing a road. And also the fact that when I'm with real people, if I start a story and they say, "Oh, I'll tell you a bit about that later on," if I forget later on in the tour, they'll remind me. But of course, if it's all recorded, I've got to make sure that every story I've started at some point in the tour, I actually tell them the answers at some point, so they aren't then thinking, "Oh, she never did finally tell us what that all meant."
And it's I think it's a good thing. I mean, face to face, I don't think you can beat face to face. And I think people
Mm.
value face to face a little bit more now than they did because it was taken away from us. And I think when something's taken away from you, you start to appreciate what is there. But there's no doubt that the one to many principle is the way to do more and to scale a business. And I suppose with the voice audio and the self-guided tours, you could sell as many of those as you want, as many as people want, because they do it when they want to do it. And
Well, that's been the challenge with me doing in-person tours. It's me being in the right place at the right time for the right number of people, because especially, people, especially if they're in the UK, there's a limit to how much they want to pay as an individual for a tour. So you've got to have enough people who all want the same tour at the same time, or you've got somebody who's come on a holiday where they're not bothered how much they're spending and are prepared to pay more. Yeah, and you're right. It gets over the fact that I've quite often had queries. Oh, can you do this on Tuesday morning, or are you doing a tour Thursday afternoon, or and it's just when I'm not all the time there, So
only one of
um,
you.
yeah, there's only one of me, really. Yeah,
So it is a way to scale a business
yeah,
is to pre-record and obviously sell it in a different way at a
yeah.
different price point to make it more available, and that's using the one-to-many principle. It's amazing, Verity. I could chat to you about this for hours. We are running out of time. I always ask my guests, is there a piece of advice or a tip that they would like to leave the audience? And what would yours be?
I think for me, it's been a big learning curve moving from education to running a business. So really surround yourself with some people that have the business skills that you lack.
Yeah, great advice actually, because I mean, although we have skills and they're transferable and we can move them into new things, when you do come from an employed to a self-employed situation, there are so many skills. You haven't got the IT department, you haven't got the accounts department, you haven't got the marketing department. You
I,
need
d- yeah. I don't think it's just that. I think it's also the mindset of how to run a business. It's a very different mindset being employed. I think is something like the public service, the teaching and those sorts of things, to actually having to think about how you run a business and what all that goes into it, which I had no idea of.
So obviously Coventry is your specialism, as it were, but you do other tours around the heart of England. So that incorporates Stratford upon Avon, Warwick, I would assume, all the different the landmark. If people want to get in touch with you or find out more about your tours, Verity, how would they do that?
I've got an email address, tours@ventureswithverity.co.uk, mobile phone number. I've also got a website which is www.ventureswithverity.co.uk, which is okay. It's got all my contact details on there. All the normal social media channels, really. I'm there. I've got an unusual name, so people can usually find me.
It's great. And we'll put your links in the show notes as well. It's been great to chat to you today, Verity. That's Verity Tiff from Ventures with Verity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Lovely.